Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, most of us know anxiety, right? That consuming feeling, maybe about work or life.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
But today, we're going, well, much deeper than that usual worry. We're exploring a kind of terror, really, that targets the very foundation, the assumption that you even exist.
That's right. We're talking about existential fear specifically as it shows up on the spiritual awakening journey. It's a profound topic.
Yeah, it sounds intense.
It is. And our sources, people like Dr. Chiki Davis, academic work, plus insights from spiritual teachers who've mapped this territory, they all point to this being a really critical threshold, not just some minor hurdle.
Okay.
And it's something people often misunderstand or, frankly, get quite stuck in.
Right. So our mission today, then, is to try and cut through that confusion. We want to define what this primal terror actually is.
Yeah, how it's different from those maybe more blissful initial awakenings people talk about.
Exactly. And where does it fit? Like, are there maps for this? We mentioned the Buddhist fetters, maybe.
We'll definitely touch on that. It provides a useful structure.
And most importantly, for you listening, what are some practical ways to navigate this if or perhaps when it arises?
Okay, so let's start right there with the core distinction. This isn't your standard fear of, say, physical death. Not directly, anyway.
Okay.
Existential fear is that raw, sometimes just debilitating dread that hits when the bedrock assumption, I exist, starts to crumble.
Wow.
It's this overwhelming felt terror. The sense that the I you've always known, the one experiencing life, remembering things, planning, might not actually be real. At all.
So it goes beyond just the fear of the body dying. It's the fear that the experiencer itself is dissolving.
Precisely. The very center point.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. The anatomy of it.
Right.
How is this different fundamentally from something like a really bad panic attack? Because that can feel pretty annihilating too.
That's a great question, and it gets right to the heart of it. A panic attack, intense as it is, usually has some kind of object, even if it feels internal.
Right, like fear of losing control or fear of a heart attack or...
Exactly. Fear of something. But this existential terror, the sources emphasize it has no external trigger and, crucially, no real object. It's pointing directly inward.
Towards what then?
Towards the root of identity itself. Or, more accurately, towards the lack of a solid, findable identity there.
But the body doesn't know that, does it? It reacts like it's the end of the world.
Oh, absolutely. Your nervous system goes into full red alert, adrenaline dump, chest tightness, that feeling of imminent doom, even if you're just sitting quietly.
Why, if there's no real threat?
Because our whole system is fundamentally wired for self-preservation. And the self it's trying to preserve is this deeply ingrained idea of a permanent, continuous me.
The ego self.
The ego self, the sense of being a separate entity. When the structures supporting that sense start getting dismantled, the nervous system basically misinterprets it. It reads psychological deconstruction as literal physical death.
So the fear is the self-construct's last stand, its final defense mechanism kicking in.
That's a very good way to put it. It's the psyche's defense against perceived annihilation. It feels utterly real.
I know some teachers, like Angelo DeLullo, actually use the term existential terror for this stage, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Like your operating system is crashing and there's no reboot option.
That captures the feeling, yes. All the usual footholds, psychological, emotional, even conceptual understanding, they just start to dissolve. You feel groundless.
The terror isn't about failing at life, then?
No, it's much more fundamental. It's the visceral, gut-level confrontation with the possibility that the central me we assumed was always there, maybe never existed in the first place.
Okay, this leads straight into something really important, the common point of confusion. People often mistake those initial, sometimes blissful shifts in consciousness for this deeper, more radical ego death. How do we help people listening tell the difference?
Yeah, this is super common and understandable because the journey unfolds in stages, right? You typically start fully identified with your body and mind, your thoughts and feelings.
Standard operating procedure for most of us.
Then, maybe through meditation or inquiry, you start to recognize yourself more as spacious awareness, the observer behind the thoughts.
That feels good. Liberating, even.
It absolutely can be. That initial awakening often does feel expansive, blissful. The mental noise quiets down. Life feels more immediate, less constricted. The self feels less solid.
People call it the honeymoon phase sometimes.
They do, and it's a genuine important shift. But, and this is the crucial distinction, it's often temporary, and more importantly, the underlying sense of being usually remains. Meaning you still feel like you are the awareness, you are the witness, there's still a subtle subject there.
Okay, so ego death is What then?
Ego death, as described in these deeper contexts, is far more radical. It's the actual dissolution of that sense of being a separate, enduring self entirely.
Whoa.
And that's why it's often characterized by this intense embodied terror. It directly confronts our deepest survival programming, the core belief that a continuous self must exist for life to continue.
So if you're feeling, like lovely sense of peace and quiet mind, maybe some spaciousness, that's likely initial awakening. Still profound, but maybe not the full demolition.
Likely, yes. But if you're experiencing intense, groundless, visceral dread, fear that seems to come from nowhere and have no specific cause, that could well be the sign you're approaching this deeper threshold.
It's facing the void, really.
It is. And the attachment being challenged here isn't just to, your identity as a good person or your job. It's the attachment to the very idea of any kind of separate self.
Even the subtle ones.
Yeah.
Like the witness.
Yes.
Or the soul.
Yes. The physical self, the egoic thinking self, and even that seemingly pure I am presence or sense of being a soul. At this stage, any claim to being a separate something is up for review. And confronting non-existence at that level, it's incredibly destabilizing.
It sounds like you're describing something almost biologically hardwired. Is this kind of intense barrier something anticipated in, say, older spiritual maps? Where does this ultimate fear fit into the grand scheme of awakening?
Absolutely. This isn't some new phenomenon. We can ground this experience using frameworks like the Buddhist system of the 10 fetters. These are the attachments or bindings that keep us tied to suffering.
Okay, the 10 fetters. Where does this existential terror fit in that list?
It sits quite far along the path, actually. We're talking specifically about the 8th fetter, which is known in Pali as Asmimana.
Asmimana. How would you translate that simply in this context?
The most common translations are the conceit of I am, or simply the idea of me.
Conceit. Like arrogance.
Not necessarily arrogance in the usual sense. By the time someone encounters the 8th fetter, the more obvious attachments like intense desire, anger, clinging to rules are often already weakened or gone. The mind is quite purified.
So what's left?
What's left is this very subtle, almost background residual sense that there is still a me who is experiencing reality, even if that me is now perceived as vast, open consciousness. It's the subtle feeling of being a subject.
I see. It's like...
Yeah.
Even if the content of my experience is pure awareness, there's still the feeling that I am that awareness.
Exactly. It's that subtle sense of I am something. Even I am awareness is a claim, a position. Asmimana is that final, subtle insistence on being a subject, an experiencer.
It sounds almost invisible, like a clean window you don't notice until something highlights it.
That's a great analogy. It's not egoic in a selfish way anymore. It's just this nonverbal assumption of subjectivity. And the intense fear arising is actually proof that this subtle fetter is still active.
How so?
Because if there were truly no sense of me left at all, who would be there to fear annihilation? The fear is the conceit of I am defending itself.
Wow. So even sitting in what feels like profound realization, saying I am pure awareness, that very I am, signals the 8th fetter is still in place.
Precisely. Breaking this 8th fetter means confronting this last vestige of identity head on. The existential fear erupts because the question, if there's no me at all, not even as awareness, then what is left, isn't an intellectual puzzle anymore.
It has to be lived through.
It has to be lived through. And the fear is the mind recoiling from the possibility that the answer isn't what it expects, that it might be nothing in any conceivable sense.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating and maybe paradoxical, because many spiritual paths do point to recognizing I am awareness as like the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And it brings incredible peace for many, for a long time.
It does. That realization is hugely significant, a massive liberation from the smaller ego.
So why? Why push beyond it? If recognizing I am awareness feels like home, why risk diving back into terror by questioning even that? What do the sources suggest is beyond the I am?
Because, from the perspective of these deeper teachings, even the state of I am awareness, however sublime, is still a subtle conceptual position. Think about it. I, subject, am, linking verb, awareness, object state.
Okay, there's still a relationship there.
There's still a subtle claim of being something. In the most radical stages described, even that fundamental I am sense is recognized as just another thought form, albeit a very refined one.
So true liberation is
What?
not being anything.
It's liberation from the compulsion to be anything at all, even pure awareness. Because defining oneself as awareness subtly implies an other non-awareness. It sets up a final duality. Real freedom is seen as lying beyond even that subtle identification.
That sounds, well, terrifying to the mind. The brain wants categories, anchors, definitions.
Yeah.
No anchor at all, just unbound.
Utterly unbound, radical formlessness. And that is why the terror is so intense. But, and this is key, we have to reframe the terror. It's not a sign you're going crazy or failing.
What is it then?
It's a signpost, a critical indicator that you are approaching a very profound transformation. It feels like an impenetrable wall designed to stop you. But the consistent testimony is that this fear is the doorway.
The way through is through the fear itself.
Exactly. The ultimate freedom lies beyond that need to secure yourself as someone, somewhere, somehow.
Okay. This is crucial then. For anyone listening who might be experiencing this, or maybe anticipates it, we need practical advice. Abstract ideas are one thing, but when that raw terror hits, you need tools. How do you navigate this without just collapsing or running away?
Right. When the fear is that visceral, your thinking mind, your prefrontal cortex is basically offline. Rationalizing won't cut it. You need embodied, direct practices. We can pull 3 core strategies from the material.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, mindful presence. And this isn't just casually being aware, it's more radical. When the fear surges, the body's instinct is pure resistance, clenching, shallow breathing, wanting to escape.
Makes sense. Fight or flight.
Exactly. The practice has to be the conscious opposite of that. You have to intentionally, radically allow the physical sensations of fear to be present in the body.
So if you feel shaking or that crushing pressure in your chest, don't try to fix it or breathe it away.
Not initially. The first step is just to meet it. Put your attention right on the raw sensation. Notice the tightness, the heat, the trembling, the energy moving, but try not to label it fear or bad or dangerous.
Just the raw data.
Just the raw energy. When you strip away the label fear, what's left is just intense sensation. Allowing it this way without fighting it actually starts to soften the resistance. And often it's the resistance that amplifies the terror. It's a physical practice of non-rejection.
Okay, that's number 1. Allow the sensations. What's second?
Second is self-inquiry, but not intellectual inquiry. It's using pointed questions during the experience, like a flashlight, to illuminate the unreality of the self that feels threatened.
What kind of questions?
Simple, direct ones, like, who exactly is afraid right now? Or, can I actually find the one who is experiencing this dread? Look for the entity that feels like it's being annihilated.
And the deepest one might be?
Perhaps the one that goes to the root. Is the me that I feel I'm protecting actually findable? Where is it located?
What happens when you ask that in the midst of terror?
Often, if you genuinely look, you find nothing solid. Emptiness, where the mind insisted a vulnerable entity must be. This inquiry directly undermines the premise of the fear that there's a solid me to be destroyed. It reveals the conceptual nature of the self being feared for.
Powerful. Okay. Mindful presence, self-inquiry. What's the third?
Third is compassion and trust. This is vital because your whole biological system is screaming, emergency.
Right. It thinks it's dying.
It absolutely does. So you need to bring conscious compassion to your nervous system. Acknowledge, okay, body, I understand you're scared. You're doing your job, protecting what you think is me. But gently remind yourself, this isn't actually physical death. This is psychological territory.
So self-soothing in a way.
Yeah.
But based on understanding the process.
Yes, and trusting the process itself. Trusting that this is a known threshold. Teachers and texts map this out. It's a natural, albeit incredibly intense, part of the unfolding for some. Trust that you can pass through it.
Is there like an analogy or a story from the sources that captures what happens if you do manage to stay present with this?
Yes, there's a really potent description that comes up. Imagine the anchor of your identity. That sense of me just drops away completely. What rushes in is wave after wave of this raw terror, but it's unmediated. There's no me interpreting it anymore.
Just pure intensity.
So intensity. And here's the paradox. When that terror is fully allowed, fully embodied, without any resistance, mental or physical, its fundamental nature seems to shift.
Shift how?
It reveals itself as inseparable from bliss. Or maybe exhilaration.
Terror becomes bliss. That sounds counterintuitive.
Think about a massive roller coaster drop. If you tense up, resist, scream against it, it feels like pure fear, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you could somehow totally surrender to it, the speed, the G-force, the falling sensation, doesn't that fear sometimes flip into intense exhilaration? a thrill.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. The raw entity is the same, but the interpretation changes.
Exactly. The insight is that the mind's labeling, this is fear, this is bliss, creates the apparent opposition. But the raw underlying energy, when met without resistance, might be the same unconditioned, empty intensity. Fear and bliss become two sides of the same coin, revealed when the resistance drops.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. The labels create the separation.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, this existential fear feels like the most profound threshold because it strips away the deepest attachment of all. The very belief that a me exists. Moving through it isn't about surviving annihilation. It's about moving into a kind of liberation that's beyond our usual concepts of existence or non-existence. It's stepping off the map we thought we knew.
So the key takeaway from this deep dive is really recognizing this intense fear, not as a problem or a sign you're going backwards, but potentially as a sign of imminent deep progress.
Precisely, a sign you're touching the very root of conditioned identity. And if you can navigate it with presence, inquiry, and trust, it's transformative.
Wow. Okay. That gives us a lot to think about. Before we wrap up, any final thought for our listeners to maybe chew on?
Well, building on that last point, if, as these insights suggest, the mind's habit of labeling creates distinctions like fear versus bliss, making them seem like opposites when the underlying energy might be neutral.
Okay.
Consider this. What other fundamental opposites rule your daily life? Maybe things like success and failure, or stability and change, security and uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Could be that these two are primarily conceptual labels layered onto experiences that, in their raw form, might be more neutral, more empty than we assume. What might happen if you experimented with softening your resistance to one side of those familiar coins in your own life? Just something to explore.